of January 6th, right? I guess there's no way for him to spin it, so he plays the amnesia card. Funny how everyone in D.C. seems to have amnesia whenever there are tough questions being asked.
Yeah, and this is the top question he knew he was going to get, because every time a senior Justice Department official involved in the January 6th, investigations or whatever they're calling it, or a senior FBI official comes up, they know they're going to be asked that question, and they simply keep coming up and saying they simply don't know.
Definitely. And do you think that there is something rotten with the confidential human resource the system as it is now? $42 million a year. Remember during the Russiagate hoax, I think it was Christopher Steele, the former foreign spy. I think he was offered as much as $3 million if he could verify parts of his dossier, which of course he couldn't, and yet they still use the dossier as the genesis of all these different investigations. I think even at one point it might have been Igor Danchenko, who was also being investigated as a possible Russian spy or operative.
As a spy, yeah.
Exactly.
And the FBI is paying him, suspecting him as a spy anyway. It's insane the way the Bureau is running. The FBI is completely broken. I used to be a big supporter of the FBI. I did a training program for them at Quantico years ago. FBI Director Mueller gave members of my team and me, citations for the work that we did for the Bureau. So I used to be a big fan, but I've come to the conclusion after all this, the FBI is completely broken. It needs to be broken apart into pieces, and its essential functions transferred to other agencies. And a lot of its woke personnel and incompetent personnel just purged.
It is. I remember reading on the 60s, the MK Ultra CIA, but one interesting thing there was that some members, I think it was Gottlieb and others, they were running MK Ultra, but when there would be a new head of the CIA appointed, that guy didn't necessarily know what was going on. He wasn't even told everything. So it's a case of sometimes the left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing. And do you think there's a similar dynamic going on right now with the FBI and other intel agencies, that the larger and bigger that they get, like we were talking about the confidential human resource, that system having $42 million a year, who's overseeing it? There are so many people. Where does the buck stop? Do you think that that's how bad actors can start to get away with so much? And that's how perhaps other members of the same agency may not know exactly what's going on?
No, the buck stops with the Attorney General. The FBI reports directly to the Deputy Attorney General. So if the Attorney General wants information from the FBI, he's entitled to just about anything he wants. And really, the buck stops with the President. The President hires and fires these people. He's responsible for the executive branch. There are reasons not to bring up certain matters that would jeopardize sources and methods or jeopardize a prosecution or investigation. But you can always say, just as Stephen D'Antonio said in a closed session yesterday, you can speak before a closed session, I mean it's a classified session where the contents can't be revealed. Or you can simply answer a yes or no question without compromising anything. Did you have any paid informants or assets conducting criminal acts of violence at the U.S. Capitol on January 6th? Justice Department still won't say. Neither will the FBI.
No, they won't. And also, it reminds me of, I think it was a fellow congressman I have here, actually, Representative McClintock. He brought up a very valid point. It was on a slightly different issue, but it kind of gets at the same rot that we're talking about here. And he says that looking at the appointment of Jack Smith, and of course he's talking to Merrick Garland as he says this, he, meaning Smith, was deeply involved in the IRS scandal of a few years back. His malicious prosecution of Governor McDonnell was unanimously overturned by the Supreme Court of the United States, and yet Garland still appointed him to now be prosecuting Joe Biden's chief rival. Of course, that would be President Trump. But, I mean, talk to us about what that says about just how openly political. I mean, I know the intel agencies, it's been rife for many years, but a lot of it used to be more closed doors, but now it's so out in the open.
Yeah. The Justice Department is one of the most politically biased agencies of the whole U.S. government, according to the Federal Elections Commission, which follows the campaign donations by government employees. So we'll say X% of Justice Department employees who gave political donations gave to Democrats. It's over 90%. It's nowhere near. The State Department's one of the most conservative agencies of the U.S. government. It's much closer to the population in general, believe it or not. But Justice Department is so skewed, and it goes even beyond Democrat and Republican. It goes to critical theory and cultural Marxism, where you have these lawyers who, many of whom would otherwise be unemployable in the real world. They're government lawyers. They studied critical theory under Marcuse and all the other cultural Marxists to transform America by using the legal system and manipulating our legal code and our Constitution to transform our country into something it was never meant to be. That's what we're seeing with the FBI now. You don't see them busting Antifa people this way. You don't see them busting violent BLM people this way. You don't see them busting the Revolutionary Communist Party or any of these other radical groups. You just see them going after a certain group and creating a whole false narrative behind it.
That you do, and of course everything that Massey said was on point, but if the rest of the party doesn't back him up on doing some severe and deep budget cuts during this budget fight that we have right now on Capitol Hill, it's going to mean nil in the end. But Dr. Waller, is always a pleasure. Thanks for joining us tonight. Coming up next.